From Connecticut Public Radio in New Haven, this is Seasoned. I'm Chef Plum.
And I'm Tegan Engel. I'm your guest co-host this month.
We sure ate and drank some delicious things together this month, Tegan. But before we jump into all that, I want our listeners to get to know you a bit. Can you talk a little bit about your work on the Table Underground and describe some of the food-related advocacy that you're so passionate about?
Sure. In the simplest terms, I'm a chef and food entrepreneur turned food justice activist and community organizer. I started the podcast and website The Table Underground so that I could record inspiring stories about people in our local community as well as nationally and internationally doing food justice work.
Food justice work, like what does that mean?
Yeah, it can look like a lot of different things. It starts off by listening to communities about what matters to them and what's important. It might be about improving school lunches or supporting rural and urban farmers. It might be about food sovereignty for Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks, or food policy, supporting food entrepreneurs, really about anything that has to do with food and justice and improving people's lives.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and it's some great work you do, and I can't wait to share with everyone how much fun we had this month.
Absolutely. I'll share a lot more about me during my conversation with my friend, the culinary historian Michael Twitty, coming up.
Very excited about that. And later in the show, Tegan and I toast to friendship in the new year while learning about natural wine from enthusiast Oni Obiacha and natural wine purveyor Adam Bitker.
But first, my favorite bread in the state happens to be made right here in New Haven. I've been enjoying bread at Atticus Bakery and Bookstore since I was a little kid. But I truly fell in love a few years ago when they started making the most incredibly delicious sourdough loaves. And they started using whole grain Northeast grown wheat for all of their baked goods. This change was led up by second generation CEO of Atticus and Chabasso Bakeries, Charlie Nogaro Jr., who I'm really happy to call my friend and my colleague. My inspiration to record our story today, though, actually came in noticing how the bakery is featuring some of the traditional sweets and breads of their talented Latinx bakers. One of those bakers is Selene Tapazzi, who you'll meet in a minute. And one of those recipes is Rosca de Reyes, a traditional sweetbread originally from Spain that was brought to Latin America and the Caribbean through colonization. This decorated bread is baked to celebrate Three Kings Day on January 6th, marking the Feast of the Epiphany. It's the day that the three wise men in the Christian tradition brought gifts to the baby Jesus.
We make our way with Charlie from the larger Chabasso side of the bakery to meet with bakery manager Selene Tapazzi on the Atticus side of the operation.
So we're here at Chabasso Bakery and Atticus Bakery with Charlie Nogaro, the CEO of Atticus and Chabasso. Charlie, could you describe a little bit for us about this space that we're in right here?
Yeah, so we're at 360 James Street. This is Chabasso Bakery, and a really small portion of it is Atticus Bakery. Chabasso Bakery is a wholesale manufacturer of frozen and fresh artisan breads. And then we have Atticus Bakery here that makes pastries, breads, and all sorts of other things for our two retail locations in New Haven.
Charlie, talk about this room we're in right now, because you hear all this noise going on, this background noise, these big mixers mixing. I see lots of yeast kind of just bubbling away over here in these, what could be described as a cauldron.
Yeah, so we're in the mixing room for Chabasso Bakery, and you're looking at basically gigantic hook mixers for Chabasso Bakery. So they're 500-pound capacity each. That's a batch size for us. We make about 5 or 6 of them an hour, depending upon what line we're using. And then from here, it goes on to a line that actually shapes and weighs the dough, and then off to proofing. Yeah, so that's this.
All right, Charlie, could you take us over to the Atticus portion of this large bakery here?
Yeah, sure. Well, so we'll walk over there.
So we're passing tons of speed racks, and there's a coating of flour on just about everything here.
Hey, Charlie, are these massive ovens over here to the right? I see them spinning.
These are rotating rack ovens that we do a lot of the Atticus baking of pastries and breads. And then over on your right is a tunnel oven where all the Chabasso bread gets made. So we're doing these multiple thousands of pounds of bread right next to where we're doing a couple 100 pounds of bread just for retail.
These ovens are like 8 feet tall.
Yeah, so this is where we're making ciabatta rolls. So this got mixed about 6 hours ago. And Marco over there is loading it onto an oven loader. And there's a wing conveyor that picks up the bread off of these wooden boards and then places it gently down into the tunnel oven. The tunnel oven's a bunch of plates that are moving, and it's about 80 feet long, and it takes about 18 minutes to bake. So that's the more industrial side of what we do.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've just walked in. It's just on the other side of the wall from that big oven. is the Atticus Baking. So there's 4 or 5 people in here making pastries and breads just for our retail locations. It's much more wider array of what we do with very different ingredients. So over here we only use fresh milled, locally sourced flour, either from Massachusetts and Maine. And that goes into everything we make.
You're the second generation of this family business, and can you tell us a little bit about some of the changes that you've made to the Atticus Bakery since you've taken over?
Yeah, so my dad started this business in 1975 as a bookstore, and then it became a cafe in 81, and then a bakery came out of that in 96. The bakery really grew to become a wholesale manufacturer, and Selene has actually been here for most of that journey. So for a while we were actually making our own pastries, and we paused, and then in 2016 I got a chance to work solely on the Atticus side of things, and we actually got to bring back all of those like really special pastries and cookies and breads. And Selene fortunately was still here and remembered how to do it, so she was really instrumental to building that program back up.
We're here with Selene Tapazzi, who is the bakery manager of Atticus Bakery in New Haven, and she's a 2022 Connecticut Restaurant Association nominee for Baker of the Year. Hi, Selene.
Hello.
When did you come to this country and what brought you here?
I got here 27 years ago, 19 September of 1995.
How old were you?
I was 19 when I first got here. I came here to like make money because my family in Mexico.
Good reason.
Yeah, so in Mexico it is no way to make enough money to support my family. So I have 4 small sisters. I have a single mother, so decided to move to this country.
When did you start working at Chabasso and Atticus?
I started working at Chabasso the same year, on 1995, and then I used start working like 5 years ago, start working for Atticus.
I know that one of the things that you do at the bakery is that you're making laminated doughs. That's a really special thing. Can you describe to us what that is?
Okay, laminated dough is like, for example, like our croissants, chocolate croissant, our danishes.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to put inside of the dough batter to keep a process to laminate.
Laminating itself is like a rolling and folding of the dough, right?
Yes.
We roll it through a machine, sheet it through, fold it over, roll it again.
Yes.
It creates those layers.
Yeah.
So the recipe that we're here to hear about today is the Rosca de Reyes that's made for Three Kings Day.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the tradition and meaning behind this bread?
All right, so usually in Mexico, every 6th of January, that's like when we celebrate with the Rosca de Reyes to discover the baby Jesus inside of the Rosca. So we used to put like a little baby plastic Jesus inside of the Rosca. So we had to cut a piece. After the person get the piece, had to cut in half to see he got the baby Jesus. If they have the baby Jesus on February 2nd, they had to brought some food for everybody else to celebrate. So all the people get the baby Jesus inside. So had to bring any type of food, and they can celebrate all together.
So it's not like winning. If you find the baby Jesus, you have to make food for everybody.
Yeah.
Got it.
For yet
Yes.
another holiday.
Got it.
La
Yeah.
Candelaria, yeah?
Yeah, la Candelaria, February 2nd. You can make tamales, mole, pozole, whatever. Pizza, whatever you can make.
Shall we go over and take a look at it?
Okay, so this is the Rosca de Reyes. So it is like how do I can explain the shape?
An oval.
Yeah, no ball. So Rosca.
And the rosca it's supposed to be in the shape of a crown, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because you can put fruit on top, like dry figs, something like guava. So that means that's the jewels into the crown of the Three Kings.
The jewels on the crown, yeah.
Yeah. Before it was just plain, right? But we made 2 samples today. One is filled with pastry cream inside.
I love pastry cream.
Oh, that's
Pastry
good.
cream loves me.
And that's one of the ways that you adapted the bread for this bakery. Can you describe a little bit about how did you go from the traditional recipe to what you're making in the bakery now?
Well, usually here we don't use any white flour, right? So everything we make is just whole wheat. We had to run tests first to see how it works, but it works very good with the whole wheat flour. We use like spelt flour, 75% high extraction flour. We use whole wheat pastry flour, but we don't use any white flour.
And this is a sweet bread. Can you tell us some of the other ingredients that are in it?
Okay, so this one is sugar, flour, orange zest, and the special flavor it gives to the Rosca de Reyes, it is we call agua de azar. That's like orange blossom in English.
Orange blossom
Yeah.
water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And something special is because you're using all natural ingredients here, you're using butter in this, and a lot of bakeries use margarine or hydrogenated fats in it, so that's something nice about the one that you're making here also.
Yeah.
A lot of talking about this. Can we taste this bread?
It's beautiful. All right, chef, dig in.
I think he get it.
Is there just one baby Jesus in here or multiple?
It is a 3 on each.
This slice, I sliced a couple on purpose. That way, it's like a,
All right,
it's
I'll
like
try.
a game.
I'll try this slice
The
with the
middle
red
one.
strip on it. Maybe I got the baby Jesus. So this is a recipe that was brought from Spain into Mexico. Ooh, it's still warm.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Super warm, super airy, nice and soft.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I love
usually
the
it is
brown on
very
top.
soft.
It's very. Oh, that's great. Let me get in here.
Yeah.
It's really delicious. It's not too sweet.
No.
The orange comes through
Oops.
a lot on
Yeah.
here.
The combination of the bread and the sweet on top, it makes enjoy the piece of the rosca.
Can you describe the sweet crunch that's on top and how you make that?
Okay, so that's like flour, butter, powdered sugar. So you mix all together like a fondant, I can say. So you know the for the cake decoration, something like that. But this one, when you bake it, so it kind of dries.
That's absolutely delicious.
It's really delicious. And the
Absolutely
sweetness of the crunch on
Oh,
top
man.
with the mild sweetness and like light orange flavor inside the bread is just such a delicious
The
combination.
crunch on top is money.
So good.
I didn't get the baby Jesus, by the way.
I didn't get the baby Jesus either. I appreciate that you put more than one in, so whoever gets it, you have a team to make all the tamales for the February
team.
2nd. It's not all one person. This looks amazing, Selene.
Thank you.
So delicious. What do you think, chef?
It's all super warm. I think it's really cute to eat something like
Yeah.
delicious bread in general. Warm is better, but this, with that pastry cream in the middle being warm, I love this. I want to get a kiddie pool of this and just swim in it.
I also love that the bread is made with whole grain. I can feel that it feels like a little better to eat it than just like a bleached white flour. So it
True.
feels like a little less guilty to eat this delicious pastry, and definitely something I would buy for a special occasion.
The sweetness is not overpowering this either. It's not killing me.
No.
Was this your family recipe or was it from somebody else?
No, this recipe is from Odilia. That's our lead baker. She brought the Rosca de Reyes recipe here.
So shout out to Odelia for this amazing recipe that can now be appreciated by people in New Haven and all around Connecticut.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would like 9 of these to go, please. So recently, you were nominated by the Connecticut Restaurant Association for Baker of the Year. What does that kind of recognition mean to you? To know that your work is appreciated, by just so many food lovers in the community and peers in the industry.
So I guess that's like one very good thing is happening after like many years of like keep working hard and hard. And another thing it is like, for example, being like a Spanish person, Latin person. I'm very happy, and then I'm very thankful to Charlie and Brandy about because they are the people like to put me in this.
And thank you for taking so much time out of the day to hang out with us and show us around the bakery and to share such a special recipe. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on all your success, and I'll be pulling for you at the awards.
Thank you.
And happy Three Kings Day.
Thank you.
That was Selene Tapazzi. She's the manager at Atticus Bakery in New Haven. Selene and her team are behind the beautiful pastries you see at Atticus Cafe on Chapel Street and Atticus Market on Orange Street. The smaller family-sized Rosca de Reyes bread, adapted from lead baker Odelia Juarez's family recipe, is available for a short time during the Three Kings Day holiday, so you'll want to grab one before they're gone.
Or before I get there. And a note about the Best Baker Award nomination we mentioned from the Connecticut Restaurant Association. I was on the nominated committee this year. Just want to let you guys know that. You're listening to Seasoned. I'm Chef Plum.
And I'm Tegan Engel.
Culinary historian Michael Twitty is the creator of the blog Afro Culinaria, the first blog devoted to African-American historic foodways. In 2018, his book, The Cooking Gene, won the James Beard Award for Best Writing and Book of the Year. His latest book is Koshersoul, The Faith and Food Journey of an African-American Jew.
I was fortunate enough to sit down with my longtime friend to talk about his most recent book. Michael, welcome to Seasoned.
Well, thank you so much, Tegan.
I'm so happy to be with you today. We first met in 2015 when you were working on your book, The Cooking Gene, and I was as excited then as I am now to be with you. Your life revolves around food and connecting to food through your cultural and spiritual journey. And also for myself as an Ashkenazi white-skinned Jew, but as someone who has a family that are mixed race and Black Jews and a community of Black Jews, I am just so grateful for your work and so happy to be with you today.
Thank you.
I thought we could honor these Jewish and African traditions today by starting with honoring our ancestors. It is because of the survival of our ancestors, literally, that we are here today. And often when I'm gathering and working, I like to dedicate my work to one of my ancestors. So I wanted to call in my bubby, Selma Rosenblatt, to the table of our conversation. She continues to inspire me as my ancestor for her dedication to the community of all humans. And I wanted to open it to you. Is there an ancestor that you would like to welcome into our conversation?
Absolutely. My mother, blessed memory, Patricia A. Townsend, who was my primary cooking teacher, my father, William Twitty, who taught me so much about my history and origins, and my grandparents, Hazel Todd Townsend, who was grandparent I was closest to and a huge teacher for me in culture and history. My grandfather, Gonz Lee Twitty, my grandfather, Walter Lee Townsend, and my grandmother, Eloise Booker Twitty.
Ashe. Thank you. It's so powerful, the work that you've done to bring your ancestors into living memory in the work that you do. And it's so relevant to your book, The Cooking Gene, which was such a celebrated book that I think lots of our listeners will know you for, and also that they might have seen you on the docuseries High on the Hog. But for people who are meeting you for the first time today, could you tell us a little bit about your new book, Koshersoul, and what this book means to you and why it was so important for you to write?
The Cooking Gene and Koshersoul are part of a trilogy. The trilogy of books talks about identity. The Cooking Gene addresses my African-American and Southern roots and African roots through food and through history. Koshersoul is about my relationship to Judaism, Jewish peoplehood, and food, and what it means to be intersectional. And the last book will be about queer identity in the kitchen. And the reason why is because, people meet me and they go, how many of you could there possibly be? And I'm just like, that's a very dangerous question to ask, because there are more of us than you think there are figures who are queer, Black, and Jewish.
That's right.
And it's because the intersection of those three identities really does give someone a certain level of strength and confidence and also awareness. Once I discover that I can be myself in a certain light and find acceptance, well, that's what I'm going to gravitate to. And that's the energy I'm going to give the world. I write these books because I want people to, first of all, have a blueprint for their own uniqueness. It's not about me. It's not about bearing the banner for any of the subjects that I have, even though I want to make a significant contribution. It's about making sure that everybody else who's out there who doesn't fit a mold can tell their own story on their own terms.
Yes, absolutely. I love in the book that you actually talk about how white supremacy kind of created the idea that Jews are white.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what you do in this book is that you're reminding us that actually Jews are from all over the world and look like all different kinds of people. And so I love how you both pull in kind of that message about how white supremacy has affected the Jewish community as well as the Black community in the way that you talk about kosher and soul coming together.
Right.
You talk about queerness in this book, and that queerness doesn't only mean being gay, that queerness means being outside the norm. And so that you represent in your being these many different queernesses of being Black, of being Jewish, of being gay, and you also say of being fat. And I was thinking about this and thinking also that this book, in the way that it's structured, is also queer.
Mm-hmm. Only you could find me out like that.
It is outside the norm of how you structure a book, right? It kind of defies literary classification. There's recipes, but it's not a cookbook. There are lots of amazing personal stories, but it's not only a memoir. And I was wondering if you could dig into describing some of the different parts of this book and how they helped you to tell the complexity of this story about what Koshersoul is.
Here's the first thing. We communicate differently. We have enforced the idea that only the Northern Western European way of communicating very directly, very linearly is the way to tell a story. When in an African context, stories are told in concentric circles. And in a Jewish and Middle Eastern context, stories are told in zigzags. In both traditions, there is call and response, but there's also an energy flow, a vibe. And that can't be expressed A to Z. It has to be expressed in an organic way. So in Koshersoul, for example, I have a lot of sections called Maise. A Maise is a story in Yiddish, as in the phrase Baba Maise, which literally means a grandmother's story. In other words, unfortunately, what's called an old wives' tale in English. So for me, it was important to really talk to you about the anecdotes and incidences in my life where, I was shocked out of complacency. So when you create and craft a narrative, something that's so complex and there's so many different elements and angles, one situation that I did come across in my life was, wearing a kippah in public. Oftentimes I'll meet African Americans who will say things to me like, oh, my grandmother was Jewish. I hook into the narrative, say, okay, tell me more. And if those same people walked into a shul with their whole yikas in front of them, be like, oh, yeah, you're Jewish. And people kind of find themselves in my visibility, which I think is really fantastic. But it also tells you how we still conceive people as being in bubbles and boxes. Mm-hmm. I don't want that. I wanted a book that was already unboxed and unbubbled. Asking the question, what if my thing was the norm and your thing wasn't? Kind of recentering how we look at these stories, how we look at ourselves. A lot of times we have to explain, it's like, okay, explain yourself. If you're multicultural, explain yourself. If you're intersectional, explain yourself. If you're multiracial, explain yourself. No, how about this? How about I explain to you what I want to explain and you figure out the rest?
One of the things that connects Judaism and African diaspora traditions is that they're both earth-based.
Mm-hmm.
I really love how you carry that into the kitchen with your section on gardens at the back of the book, and that you lay out these different diaspora gardens. Can you talk about how your relationships with gardens and growing food and harvesting food has influenced both your culinary and your personal journey?
I guess one of the biggest insults has been being called country or backwater. The idea that if you're an agrarian Black, there's something wrong with you. If you're Jewish, the only place for you is being a doctor, a lawyer, a professor, or being an urban professional. You'd have no business being on a farm. Okay, wait a minute. Torah tradition is based on pastoralism and agrarianism. All those rules that seemingly make no sense to us and understandings come from the ethics of an agrarian pastoral people. This African, Atlantic, African American, West Central African approach to the sacralization of nature. And those gardens reflect a time and idea when we got our sustenance from the ground. We had gratitude for it. We had a relationship with the ground. We had a relationship with deferred gratification, and also with understanding the life cycle and also death and loss. These are things that you can't run away from when you grow your own food and raise your own animals, all that stuff. So I really wanted people to grow gardens that reflected those heritages and also made them reflect on the ancestors that originally cultivated those varieties. It's not just grow some artichokes. It's grow this specific type of whatever that would have been grown in Turkey, or would have been grown in Poland, or would have been grown in Alabama, or would have been grown in Nigeria. It's there to help people tell their children stories about where they come from.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's something that we do in our own family. And I feel like both the growing of the food and cooking ancestral foods it is such a profound experience when we live in a world where there is so much homogenization. Like you go to the grocery store and it's all the same. We've lost all of that diversity of food. And I just think that it's such a powerful thing also as a white Jewish person, when part of unpacking whiteness is actually connecting with like my specific heritages within my ancestral lineage, right? So like the Polish lineage, the Dutch, they're all Jewish, but from Poland, from Holland, from Hungary. And so that connection with that is actually part of taking apart some of the problematic things about racism, of that like lumps all us people with light colored skin together. You recount so many conversations that you have with rabbis, with cooks, with writers, with other Jews of color about their traditions. And that's like a very important part of this book. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about why was that so important to you to include so many other voices, not just your own, in this book?
I didn't want people to say it was just me. Well, first of all, I was worried that I'd put this Koshersoul and people would go, oh, I'm the Pope of Koshersoul. I'm not. Well, I didn't want to brand Black Jewishness. I wanted people to understand that there were 1,000,001 forms to this, and that each one is to be respected and understood on its own terms and tell its own stories. I didn't want people to go, oh, there's only one way to do Koshersoul or be Koshersoul or have Koshersoul. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to express that a lot of us, not just people who, for example, are explicitly Black and Jewish Southerners who identify as white, but also identify as Southern, they're also a major part of Koshersoul. So I made it as broad as possible to let people understand that we share a common culture and identity that goes across our boundaries. And that, isn't it exciting that in America that is so divisive, that there are these common elements that we can point to and go, not everything is lost. Not everything has gates and borders around it.
Your scholarship in this book is just so, I mean, in all of your writing is so exceptional. And I love everything that you just shared about all the people that you brought in, because your scholarship is, you're studying things that are oral, that are familial, that are on different continents, that are in books. I love that you brought in people's own words, both through interviews as well as quotes and other things, to really like fully bring to life that this is a living tradition and that this is living scholarship.
Right. And somebody asked me the question. They said, well, is there a Koshersoul tradition? And I'm like, we're making it. Our past origins aren't as important as what we're doing right now and what seeds we're planning for the future. So it was a brilliant way for me to look at the whole tradition. Then, of course, Yvella McCoy, who is an African-American Orthodox activist and advocate, her prayer for Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, which is a prayer we say asking forgiveness for sins, but the night before the day of Yom Kippur, is for racial justice within, around, and above and beyond the Jewish community. These are things we can say sorry for. We can struggle together to improve. It is a spiritual mandate to be better and do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it relates to the idea of like, when I look at the way that you relate to food, that you both are cooking and making recipes relating to tradition, like based on tradition, but also bringing it into the modern current circumstance. So it's not disrespecting tradition, but it's also not all traditional.
Right.
And I think that that's important about kind of how do we live in these traditions, be they Jewish, be they African diaspora, and bring them to life. And as you move into the kitchen, I would love to hear, in all these traditions, Jewish and African diaspora, there are rituals, spells, prayers, magic, different things that happen in the kitchen space. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to get an idea about what does that look like in your kitchen and at your table before we move into talking about our recipes. What does that look like?
So in my kitchen, there is a huge Asafo flag from Ghana. And Asafo is an applique tradition. They're flags and banners that are flown by the Asafo, who are basically the traditional police, the guardians of the culture. But also I have my great-grandmother's hot comb. And so I kiss the mezuzah and I kiss the hot comb every time I walk in the kitchen, because the kitchen was a space, where we prayed, where we danced, where we ate, where we argued, where we complained, where we prepared food, where we made festivity, where we made foods for solemn occasions like funerals. My hope is to put pictures up of 5 or 6 generations of women in my family, going back to my great-great-great-grandmother. We have a photograph of her, her daughter, her daughter, her daughter, and her daughter. And so the kitchen becomes that kind of a sacred space.
So I think we should dig into some food.
Sure.
Depending on when people are listening to this, It may be as they're preparing for Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, or it may be just after they've celebrated the holidays. So hopefully hearing about some of these recipes could either be things to get on the table soon, or could be inspiration for next year. And this book could be a great gift for people to give for whatever holiday they are celebrating. I thought we would start in with Hanukkah. I think people commonly know this as a festival surrounding things cooked in oil. You have a bunch of great recipes in your book. Which one feels most exciting? Maybe starting with one of your latke recipes. You have yam latkes and Louisiana latkes. What is this Koshersoul recipe? How did they come about? What do you love about these?
So there's different layers to this. Number one is a lot of recipes that are adjustments or borrowing. So for example, the yam latkes come from Mrs. Mildred Covert and Sylvia Gerson, who wrote 3 cookbooks. My Louisiana latkes have scallion and red pepper in them. There's akara, which are West African black-eyed pea fritters as well. So you could do all of that, and beignets, and the matzo meal fried chicken, all these fried foods, right? Oil foods. All of these different smells and sensibilities and senses in the same kitchen makes it a Black Jewish kitchen. You know, for me, some of the recipes that I do are very traditional. So I can make you traditional latkes just fine. Basic bubby latkes.
Mm-hmm.
Potato, onion, oil, preferably schmaltz.
Which is the chicken fat, yeah.
Salt, pepper. Okay. Or I can make you red pepper, scallion, onion, canola oil, or olive oil latkes. Great. Or I can do sweet potato ones with different kinds of sweet potato, not just the orange guy, but, white ones, yellow ones, etc. The bottom line is that there are 8 nights to Hanukkah. So there's lots of opportunities to do as much of that diversity as you want.
Right.
You are free to adjust these recipes. If you are vegan, vegetarian, low sodium, gluten-free, and also I direct people to other people's cookbooks. The cookbooks, the fact that we do have these cookbooks that represent these almost sacred tomes to me also helps create create that space that's very curated and speaks to, who I am and what I do. And when we go to the table, I have challah covers that were made by the Jewish community in Ghana. I have kippot that have Audre Lorde and James Baldwin and Zora Neale Hurston and Jackie Robinson on them. I do my African-American Seder plate at Passover, which, listeners can read about or see online. I have several examples of that. I just really try to, it's my job and nobody else's to sort of curate the spiritual space, intellectual space, and cultural space. Peoplehood is very important to this discussion, Tegan. It's very important. I think people get hung up on the idea of Judaism as a religion, which it is not. Judaism is the religious civilization of the Jewish people. Jewish peoplehood comes before. It's just in the same way that when I try to explain what is Black to people, people go, well, that's just your color. The hell it is. It is not just my phenotype. It is the totality of my phenotype, the caste identity created based on other people's reaction to their phenotype, and my cultural cohesiveness as I try to survive that caste status. The word African can come into play at any point. So, yeah, I want that food to speak to the two diasporas, which have often been the same places at the same time doing the same things. There's going to be curry, there's going to be jerk chicken, rice and peas, and there's going to be hoppin' john and red rice and jollof rice. And I'm going to stuff those collard leaves with the jollof rice and make my own version of stuffed cabbage. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have, Yiddish barbecue. And I'm going to do, mujadra. I'm going to do sabzi polo. And I'm going to do all these things and injera and berbere. And I'm going to have fun because as we're still part of the living, our job is to enjoy life. L'chaim.
Ashe.
Ashe. Versteht.
Yes. Hashem. Yes. We say Amen Ashe at our table before we eat. So we sing
I did the same thing.
That's great. Yeah, and so for people checking out these recipes, the yam latkes are fun because those are where you're boiling the yam and mashing it. So it's more of like a mashed potato style latke. And then the Louisiana latkes are like a grated latke, but have a lot of other grated potato and onion latke have a lot of other stuff in there.
You noticed that? Wow.
Of course. So what's funny? My latkes that I make, I grew up with not very good latkes. We had great Hanukkah parties, but they were like black, burned, not very nice latkes. So I was on a mission when I started becoming a chef to make some good latkes. And I actually make half sweet potato and half white potato or gold potato latkes, which was very funny when I was thinking about talking to you, because I was like, literally have the half white, half black family mixed up latkes. So yeah, I love that you add other things in there, like different seasoning. And I wanted to mention something else too, is that a kara, traditionally among the Yoruba people, is an offering that's made to the ancestors. So the black-eyed pea fritters, we do that also for Hanukkah, and then it's also something that is traditionally an offering to the ancestors. So that's kind of a beautiful connection in there as well. How about Kwanzaa? We have some cool recipes in your book here. Your cash collards with sukuma wiki, which maybe, am I saying that as a sukuma wiki variation on that? Can you talk a little bit about that recipe and Kwanzaa? Like, how do you as a Black Jewish person celebrate Kwanzaa?
So it's another opportunity to have another, 7 days of festivities. Christmas to me is interesting because Christmas is both Chinese food, but it's also, I have to say this, as someone who's paid very close attention to the life of his enslaved ancestors, it was one of the most important days of their year. Not because of the reason for the season, it was because it was one of the few days of the year or times of the year where they had the freedom to be together as a family and celebrate each other and have unabashed fun and joy.
Yeah. Yep.
Kwanzaa to me, the sukuma wiki recipe comes from, is from Swahili. It means to push the weak. So in other words, eating collards, eating a non-meat food was a way of, stretching the economy of the table. My family lived in Kenya. It is a Kenyan dish, but it's also an ingredient that's very near and dear to Afro-Brazilians, Ethiopians, Ugandans, Kenyans, and African Americans, collards. So I wanted something that was going to speak to that. It's collards and the black-eyed peas for good luck and blessing, and acknowledging the Rosh Hashanah Seder as well, which is about good luck and blessed foods. When you make those collard greens, you serve them and you eat them together, especially if you've grown them or know where they come from. It's the most beloved feeling.
Yes. Cooking food, doing it with love, and having people feel represented in the food that they're served is just so much more important than any of the other things. Who says one law, one rule is more important than another? I actually think how we treat each other is the most important thing.
It's just, to me, it's a spectacular waste of this existence to not appreciate all and everything that you come from and all and everything you could be.
Yes. Thank you. Before we go, I want to back up for a second. You mentioned black-eyed peas for the New Year and for both the Christian New Year, the Rosh Hashanah Jewish New Year, and also in Kwanzaa celebrations, and them representing good luck. Since you're a scholar of culinary history, I know that they represent good luck, but don't know anything about where that came from. Can you share some information about that?
Well, we already know that peas and beans have good luck associations in Celtic culture. Should also be part of the Southern thing. But they'd have no black-eyed peas in Ireland. But most certainly, the black-eyed pea as a sacred symbol is definitely West African. So in Senegal, when you want to get blessings on your finances and wealth and health, you make a pot of niebe, black-eyed peas for someone, and you feed it to them. When the pot is empty, then you can go back and get a blessing. In Yoruba culture, black-eyed pea fritters are associated with Oshun, love and wealth. In the house culture tradition, love and happiness. And so black-eyed peas have a fertility reference. They're kind of legume that can grow in very restrictive conditions. Black-eyed peas are also, in other cultures in Africa, they're the eye of the creator, never closing. So all these beautiful things, right? Not to mention the fact that there are associations from India and from other parts of Africa and the Middle East, and lubia in Southwest Asia meets Northeast Africa. All of that stuff coming together. I make black-eyed pea hummus. I made black-eyed pea the Sephardi way with Eastern Sephardi with tomatoes and onions and garlic and wonderful things. Eat with rice, almost like hop and john. I make hop and john. And it's one of those foods I did not really love growing up, but now I appreciate it. I'm not over the heels in love with them because they're a little bit too healthy for me. But I do like the taste. I do enjoy them. The texture doesn't bother me. And it just makes me feel more connected to the people I come from.
Well, Thank you so much for your time. I strongly encourage people to get out there and get the book Koshersoul by Michael Twitty. It is a generous offering of a book for our community, our society, from people of any background. And Michael, just thank you so much for all the heart and wisdom that you poured into this book.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and your family and everything that you bring to this space.
Thank you, Michael.
That was culinary historian Michael Twitty in conversation with Tegan Engel. Tegan spoke with Michael about his book Koshersoul, the faith and food journey of an African-American Jew. Michael's final book in the trilogy will focus on queer identity in the kitchen.
You can see photos of Michael's kitchen, including his grandmother's hot comb, on Instagram. He's at The Cooking Gene. You'll find Michael's recipe for Akara's black-eyed pea fritters on our show page. And I'm sharing my personal recipe for the ultimate latkes as well. Hope you love them as much as we do. Go to ctpublic.org/recipes.
You're listening to Seasoned. I'm Chef Plum.
And I'm Tegan Engel.
Do we have any wine lovers listening out there?
Lots of hands went up.
How about natural wine lovers?
I think fewer hands went up, but that's only because fewer people understand what natural wine is and what makes it different from other wines in the shop.
Our next guests are Oni Obiacha and Adam Bitker.
Oni is a natural wine enthusiast and the founder of Palm Wine, which is, in his words, a natural wine social club for the homies. It's a community of wine-curious creatives with a focus less on analyzing the wines and more on the joy of the community they're creating. Palm Wine is based in New Haven, but Oni has held natural wine experiences in Hartford, New York, Montreal, Paris, and Barcelona.
And Adam is the co-founder of Ungrafted Selections. They are purveyors of conscientiously farmed, handcrafted wines from small, independent growers. We recorded our conversation from the Wise Old Dog Wine Shop in West Hartford at the shop's gorgeous farmhouse tasting table. Special thanks to owner Jacob Studenroth and general manager Thomas Haydes for letting us set up, talk, and taste natural wines there.
We also tasted a zero-alcohol wine alternative called Non that Adam was excited to share with us. We'll list everything we tasted on our show page, ctpublic.org/seasoned. But before we get to tasting, we asked Oni and Adam to help us understand what natural wine is and talk with us about the inspiration behind starting a natural wine social club. Oni starts us off.
But the way I understand natural wine is pretty much low intervention. There's not a lot of added chemicals or other additives to the processing of it. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Any real definition of natural wine has to start with farming. The work in the vineyards is typically going to be organic or in some cases even biodynamic. The purpose of this is that you really need to have vibrant, healthy living soils and ecosystems in the vineyards because you need to have great quality fruit to work with to make these wines. And you're both chefs here. So I think the way to conceptualize this is think about you're at the farmer's market, during the fall or the summer when you have this incredible bounty of produce and you get something that is at peak season.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, you do something simple, little salt, little olive oil, and you have this perfect thing. I think with natural wine, that's sort of the same idea. The raw material is incredible, and you really want to showcase that. A lot of these wines with no added sulfur taste amazing at the source or, maybe 100 miles away in Paris or something at a restaurant. But once they get thrown into a shipping container and go across the Atlantic, things can go a little sideways. I mean, there are some winemakers that have really figured out how to make wines without added sulfur that are consistently great. We're actually going to taste one of them today, but it's hard to do.
And they use the natural yeast that occurs on the grapes themselves or the natural strain from the area, correct?
Absolutely, yes. That is another very important thing. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, it's actually maybe one of the most important things is that these wines, they're spontaneously fermenting.
Right. Yeast naturally forms everywhere in the world. And on grapes, it can form around the outside of. You can see it. Sometimes that little white film on the outside of a grape, it's yeast.
Yeah, and this is also a big part of why the sort of low intervention farming is important. If you use a lot of chemical sprays in your vineyards, it's damaging to the yeast populations, and you're going to have to use cultured yeast to get a fermentation.
Yeast is our friend.
Yeast is our friend, for sure.
Yeah. So, Oni, you are a natural wine lover. I know that this brings you a ton of joy. I'd love to hear a little about, I know you discovered natural wine in 2020 during the pandemic. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that origin story of how you came to love natural wine so much?
Yeah, happy to. So Yeah, March 2020, I had the opportunity to go to Barcelona. As we all know, March 2020, COVID. So 10-day trip. The back half of the 5 days, we were quarantining in this hotel, Casa Bonet. It's known for its natural wine selection. So we had to order room service for 5 days and hang out in our rooms and have fun. I know, tough life, I'm telling you. The coming to it in a way, we're cracking open a bottle, and it reminds me of a lot of the Capri Sun and juice that I drank growing up. Was really exciting to me. I've only known the kind of the big body Bordeaux's and the Tempraneos and things of that nature. So coming back, the three of us shared a natural wine subscription over the course of a year. And then that's when I got to really learn more about just my own palate, what I like, what I don't like. One of my favorite producers at the time was Xarel-lo, because every time I saw Xarel-lo, I was like, oh, they make good stuff, not knowing that's a grape. And that was okay for me. I was just like, it's how I learned. It's how I was a novice and still am a novice about it. So over the course of the year and some change, I just drank wine. So we were doing picnics in the park, all these things, and wine was such an anchor of all that. As we all started getting into natural wine more, so I took 6 weeks to travel around Europe, and I chose my places by the natural wine restaurants I wanted to go to. What I was struck by was the culture in that place. I feel like no matter what country I was in, no matter what city I was in, every time I stepped into a natural wine restaurant, I felt like I was home. I really just fell in love with the people and the product and the ancestral method of making this amazing grape. But in doing that, as I was kind of scrolling through Instagram, thinking about how I can do this when I'm back in the US, there just wasn't that type of culture. Very traditional, old world type of just things that I didn't feel comfortable with. Not saying it's good or bad, but just not people and places I would want to drink wine. Palm wine kind of came about when I was talking to my mom in Barcelona, and she was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm drinking natural wine. And she was like, oh, palm wine? What? She was like, yeah, palm wine. That's natural wine, isn't it? And I think it was the first time that really clicked for me, understanding, for folks who don't know, when palm trees, the sap is exposed to the natural yeast in the air, in the humid air in Nigeria, it automatically ferments the palm sap. And in about an hour and some change, it gets to 4% ABV, and then that's how you have palm wine. So it's truly, to me, the foundation of natural wine.
To be clear, your family is Nigerian. That's why that was your mom's first reference for palm wine, which
100%.
Is pervasive across West Africa, and especially in Nigeria.
Absolutely. Yeah. And pervasive to the point where it's embedded into the cultural identity of a lot. Weddings, funerals, understanding the cultural implications and the relationship with this drink is such an amazing process to me to learn.
So can you talk a little more about that rootedness in palm wine from Nigeria and the culture that surrounds that and sort of your orientation towards natural wines and culture building around the world, starting from that place of palm wine in Nigeria?
Yeah, so, I tell myself, in full disclosure, at the time of this recording, I have not seen the new Black Panther, so please no spoilers. But I would say in the first Black Panther, when T'Challa became king, I think he would saber a bottle of palm wine. So I think for me, when I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, the cultural implications and really understanding how people might come to this differently and how people build community around it differently is something I'm really excited about. When I started this journey, I always said to myself, I was not going to drink wine by myself. Honestly, because I didn't like how when you open a bottle of wine, it stayed too long, it doesn't taste that great. And also, more importantly, I always knew I wanted it to be fundamentally communal. So because of that, I always been actively looking for people and places that I want to enjoy this with, and really centering the people in the process of building community rather than the type of grape or the tasting notes or anything of that nature. Really, when I think about palm wine, I think about when I was 10 years old and I had the opportunity to live in Nigeria for a year with my dad and getting handed a styrofoam cup, my father telling me to blow the fruit flies off the top and take a sip. And that was my first introduction to palm wine. And I woke up with a hangover. I can say that now as a 30-plus-year-old man. But it was amazing at the time. And having that as my first experience, sitting around with my uncles and people I've never even seen before, and really having the ability to build community, that's the wine experience my whole life. So having the opportunity to replicate that in Western culture, but through Nigerian type of cultural artifacts and ways of being and operating, has just been a real fun cultural melting pot for me.
Beautiful.
Talk a little bit about how natural wines and sustainability are linked.
Natural winemakers, like I said, they're the way that they're farming is really tied into this. And these are also people that are typically working on a pretty small scale. And these are people that are very committed to tending the land that they own in a responsible way.
Right.
A lot of times when we talk about sustainability, we talk about the way the soil is treated, the way the grapes are treated. But a piece of sustainability that gets left out a lot is the treatment of workers and people on the farms. And I wonder if you could touch on that a little bit in regards to the farms that these wines are coming from today, or just in farms in general that you're getting natural wines from.
This is a huge problem in big, more commercial wineries. There's a lot of cheap migrant labor that's really exploited, and there's certain parts of the world where it's more problematic than others. There's been some controversies around this in the past that have really blown up and shown a pretty ugly side of the industry. And, for us, that's actually a big part of it is, we really want to work with small winemakers that are working on a human scale where, this isn't even really, going to be a problem.
Is there a simple way to tell on a label, if you're just looking in a store at a bottle of wine, if it's a natural wine?
Yeah, great question.
Generally, not really. I mean, often you will find somewhere on the label that they might be made from organic fruit or grapes. There's often a symbol. Look for like a little leaf symbol on the back. I mean, there's some signs. I think the easiest way to do this is to just shop by importer. But that's a difficult thing to kind of navigate. I mean, your average consumer is not super in tune with all of the different wine importers in the market. The two wines we're gonna try today are imported by a guy named Jose Pastor. Every wine he brings in is farmed organically and fermented with native yeast, and there's a lot of other importers that kind of work under the same mantra. Louis Dresner, Kermit Lynch, Neil Rosenthal. I could kind of go on and on here.
Well, listen, enough chit-chat. Can we start tasting wine? We have glasses in front of us. We have bottles. We have spittoons for some reason. Who needs those? Let's get in here. I'm excited. The pop. Whenever you hear that sound, something fun is about to happen.
Beautiful, beautiful sound.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Here's to friendship.
Drinking wine at 10 o'clock in the morning.
So what's this wine that you're serving up right now?
This is a wine from Catalunya, a region called the Penedès. The winemaker here is a guy named Agustí Roca, a very young, talented winemaker. His parents had an estate that makes cava, which he is the current winemaker for, and they're now working under the classic Penedès DO, not
And this
cava.
grape traditionally is used to make cava.
Correct. And so this wine is from his little side project called Anima Mundi. And these are very natural wines. He's making these without any additions, including sulfur dioxide. One of the few winemakers that I've found has really cracked the code here, and the wines are always clean and stable and precise and beautiful. And this is a ancestral method sparkling wine. The grapes are Macabeo and Xarel-lo.
Oni is quietly gushing over here over this
is.
wine. What is making you so happy about this?
This is one of my babies. This wine. So one of the first times I was really excited about natural wine, and I really started to understand grapes. And Xarel-lo is my favorite grape only because it starts with an X. And it tastes fantastic. But it starts with X, and that's super cool to me. Really, looking at this bottle, the first time seeing ancestral on it, and understanding that these are just indigenous practices. This is not new. Natural wine is inherently not new. This has been done far, far before, the additives and preservatives were all there. And having the opportunity to talk to folks like Adam and understand the history of this wine, and then go to Spain. And the first time I ever went to Natural Wine Vineyard was in Spain, in the Catalonia region, and being able to talk to people and talk to the winemaker about them understanding that the reason that they're on their hands and knees picking these grapes is for these exact moments. So I just think it's just super full circle for me, and this is definitely a wine that I'm a huge fan of.
This wine is delicious.
So good.
I am so excited about this wine. This is my new best friend. Wonderful notes in the front for me. Light citrus, a little bit of grapefruit in the front.
It's not too strong. It's it's sparkling, but it doesn't kind of explode in your mouth. It's subtle on the tongue.
Absolutely. Tiny little bubbles to pull that off your palate. And then once that's pulled off, you're hit with those little light hints of vanilla going down the back of your throat, making that whole umami thing buzz in your mouth, which I really, really
salty.
love. The little salinity and the mineralist, the minerals kind of going on inside of this. This is a wonderful wine. I could think of this for Christmas time, for any kind of holidays. This is awesome. And this is not a very expensive wine generally, right?
No, it's going to retail for about $25.
Taken, what do you think? Because
It's
I'm about
delicious.
to finish the bottle.
I'm not really a drinker, but I do love champagne.
Me too.
And I like that this is has a subtleness to it.
one part of this wine that I really enjoy, especially when I think about growing community around wine, is just the drinkability.
Yeah.
Like anyone, it's such a high quality intro wine that anyone can enjoy it, whether or not you drink the big body reds or you don't like wine or you like something sparkly. Like I can give this to someone and say, this is natural wine, and it can bring them down a path to something that's funkier, that's more clever, that's more interesting, but there's so much beauty in the simplicity of this wine that's why it's always my go-to. If I'm going to give someone a bottle of something and say, hey, here's an introduction to natural wine, it's always going to start with this.
All right, what do we have next?
Jose Pastor, who's a really amazing importer that we work with, his new passion is Chile. And so here in Chile, there's these amazing up to 200 and 300-year-old vines, mostly of a grape called Pais, which was brought over in the 16th century. So these are sort of considered maybe the native varietal of Chile.
Kind of beautiful because Pais means country.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a beautiful connection.
And they are. I mean, they're they sort of feel like country wines. These are the wines that the winemakers or the farmers make to drink themselves. These are grapes that are, in many cases that are farmed with real love and dedication. And, you can get really beautiful wines. I mean, these are, have always sort of been considered, in many cases, wines of lower quality, farmer wines, etc. I mean, it's called Pipeño here. And that's the thing you'll see a lot from these Chilean paises.
Should we pour a little?
Yeah, let's pour a little.
Let's try it so we can talk about it. Taste it.
This is going to be exciting.
So at first glance, looking at the wine in the glass, a light purplish, little light reddish. It's not heavy, dark. To the nose, you get a little stone fruit kind of in the front. It almost has that jammy kind of smell to it, but it doesn't have the jammy kind of color to it I usually would expect, Let me get in here.
One of the things you often find in Pais is that there's sort of a distinct smokiness to the wines. And sometimes it can be almost overpowering. But with this wine, it's there, but it's very, very subtle. And it's got this just really beautiful, vibrant fruit that kind of jumps out of the glass at you. And that's one of the reasons I love this wine so much.
Yeah, this wine is great. It has a little bit of a funk in the front, which is fun. I always appreciate a little funk on my wine.
Smoky is a good descriptor, I think, and has a strong alcohol taste to it compared to the other wine, more prominent. Oni, what do you think of this wine?
No, I think it's fantastic. Good legs on it. It's a great glass. It's a lot different than a lot of the reds I've tasted, and I think like the Chilean, a lot of like even Beachy, the Mexican wines are a lot of fun in that area, and I think this is like cousins of that in a really fun way.
This wine, it comes in a 1-liter bottle, and it typically is going to retail for $18 to $20.
Welcome to a new experience right now, Tegan. We're going to have a non-alcoholic bottle we're going to give a try to. And that's a new one for me.
So I have to say, I'm not really a drinker. My husband's in recovery, and so I basically stopped drinking for the past 27 years or something we've been together. So while I'm enjoying tasting these wines a lot, I'm kind of excited to try this non-alcoholic version, which is a great option for people if you're not drinking for whatever reason.
It's actually kind of funny. The first thing I was going to say that Adam is like, Adam, it's kind of a heavy pour. But I'm like, actually, that doesn't happen.
So this is from a new company. They're called Non, N-O-N. They're out of Australia. Instead of trying to make non-alcoholic wine or de-alcoholized wine, they are trying to sort of make a wine-adjacent beverage. They're still grape based. They use verjus, which is the juice of underripe grapes. So the sugars are lower, the acidities are higher. They give a really good backbone to these. And then they use high-quality natural ingredients. This, for instance, is made with whole raspberries, chamomile, and Murray River sea salt. They're trying to make things that don't necessarily taste like wine, but that pair with food in the way that wines would in a certain category.
Sure.
So this is actually what they're using to sort of replace, say, rosé.
But there's not actually any fermentation going on with this, right?
Correct.
It does feel very festive when you take a sip of it, don't you think?
Yeah.
Taking
it's a little sparkling.
Yeah, a little bubbly in there, which is nice, and the chamomile really comes through. But what's the funnest ingredient in this, right? Of course, you taste raspberries. Of course, you can taste a little bit of grape. The salt.
It's a nice finish.
The
you
salt
kind of get
you
it at
can
the
see
end.
it in the bottle. Look
That's
at
actually raspberry.
That's raspberry pieces.
At.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah. This is delicious, actually. I really think this is a fun drink to have, especially if you're just trying to be festive and, maybe you have to go back to work.
And the purpose of the chamomile here is actually to give very, very subtle tannin to it.
Yeah.
So you notice that beyond just the carbonation here, there's a little bit of texture.
There is,
Yeah.
definitely.
And I would have been skeptical of this just looking at the label.
Right.
Like, oh, this is just going to be like some fruity juice tea thing in a wine bottle. But I have to say that they sort of did a good job of balancing the experience of drinking a wine where you get like the acidity and then the chamomile and then the salt. I sort of had like these three flavors hit my tongue.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this isn't just fruit in a
nice.
wine bottle. This is actually something that has more complexity.
The people that are behind this project do have culinary backgrounds, as you, I'm sure that is not surprising, having tasted this.
This is a lot of fun. I can do this for breakfast. I guess I am. But,
Well, this is so much fun. Getting to drink with you and experience a little of the joy that you bring to natural wine and to coming together in community and wine is just really beautiful. Oni and Adam, thank you so much for teaching us about natural wine and sharing these bottles with us.
So fun.
yeah, my pleasure. Thank y'all for having us.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you so much.
Can we take these home?
That was Adam Bitker and Oni Ubiacha. Adam is a wine broker and co-founder at Ungrafted Selections. Oni is the founder of Palm Wine, a natural wine social club with meetups in Hartford, New Haven, New York, Montreal, Paris, and Barcelona. Find them on Instagram at palmwine.us. Hip-hop, by the way, is the perfect backdrop for a palm wine meetup. You're hearing Hartford's own Bleak G1. Find him on Bandcamp if you want to hear more. And if you missed the names of our featured wines, go to our show page for more info and see photos of the labels, ctpublic.org/seasoned. I'm Tegan Engel. To connect with me or follow my work, visit my website, thetableunderground.com. And I'm at The Table Underground on Instagram.
Tegan, I just want to thank you for hosting with me this month and introducing me to some of your friends and some really great drinks. I hope we can do it again.
I would love that.
Before we go, friends, last March, the legend Jacques Pepin asked me to contribute to Volume 4 of Cook with Jacques Pepin and Friends. It's a cookbook you can actually watch. Best of all, it's included with a membership to the Jacques Pepin Foundation. The foundation supports community-based culinary training programs nationwide that changes lives. Volume 4 includes past seasoned guests Manit Chauhan, Melissa Clark, Patty Heenich, and so many other chefs that you love. We'll have a link to the Jacques Pepin Foundation website on our show page. Seasoned is produced by Robyn Doyon-Aitken, Katie Talarski, Emily Charash, and Catrice Claudio. Meg Fitzgerald and Sabrina Herrera are on our team as well. You can listen to the new episodes of Seasoned on Connecticut Public Radio the first Thursday of every month, or you can get our episodes delivered to your inbox even sooner by signing up for our newsletter, Full Plate. Go to our dedicated food page for information on our newsletter and for recipes, videos, and more. ctpublic.org/food. To keep up with the latest on Seasoned, follow at CTPublic on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And we're at WNPR on Twitter, or follow just the hashtag SeasonedCT on all platforms. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you right back here next month.